After the Minnesota Vikings go on their Week 7 bye week, they have released Ihmir Abdullah, running back, to make room for Kene Nwangwu coming up, our fourth-round draft pick. Ihmir Abdullah played 4 seasons with the Minnesota Vikings and is now moving on to the Carolina Panthers. On top of that, the Vikings have recently traded Stephon Gilmore, our defensive end, who's going to play linebacker with the Denver Broncos, and really just gave him away at that point. So getting rid of Ihmir Abdullah and Stephen Weatherly, these were two business decisions for Rick Spielman to make room for these new rookies to come up. Not only do we have these two rookies coming up, but we have multiple other rookies, as so far in the season, we haven't seen much from our rookies. Now, you take a look at last year, the 2020 draft class, completely different story, and that's because our entire team was injured, and they were just bad. Cameron Dantzler, Jeff Gladney, these players were starting at corner at this point in the season last year. DJ Wanham was starting at defensive end. I mean, you had some Troy Dye coming out there because Eric Hendricks and Anthony Barr were out as well. And then Justin Jefferson, obviously just lighting it up on the field. So you had a lot of rookies coming in last year who were starting with the Minnesota Vikings. Ezra Cleveland also at right guard. So far this season, it's been a completely different story. The only rookie listed as a starting right now is Christian Darrisaw at left tackle, and it took him a few weeks to finally move into the role. And that's mainly due to injuries, because Rashad Hill, like I said, set the bar very low, and Christian Darrisaw would have took over the role by now if it wasn't for injuries. So that's the first player we're going to take a look at, is Christian Darrisaw, because a lot is on the line for the Minnesota Vikings when it comes to this offensive line. Kirk Cousins. I'm high on Kirk Cousins this season, but as a whole is just an above average quarterback. I hate to say it, well, he's a good quarterback, but with a clean pocket, with the offensive line being able to do their job, the best quarterback in the NFL. He is. The Vikings, if they have a clean pocket for Kirk Cousins, with the receivers that he has, with the supporting cast at running back and receivers that he has, is the best quarterback in the NFL, as he can make plays with a clean pocket. Thing is, when he's under pressure, he's one of the lowest ranked quarterbacks when it comes to being under pressure, which I don't understand, because he can move. Kirk Cousins can run. He just doesn't do it very often. But on the run, it's harder for him to go through all of his reads. But really, it lies at Christian Darrisaw at left tackle. And against the Dallas Cowboys, him going up against I think it's Gregory, if I have his name correct. Him going up against this right defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys right now, who's one of the top-ranked defensive ends in the entire NFL, is going to be a big matchup for Christian Darrisaw to go up against. Our first-round draft pick out of Virginia Tech, 23rd overall, starting now at left tackle, is a huge sigh of relief that we have him over Rashad Hill, as Rashad Hill was the biggest disappointment on our offensive line. And so far this season, in our starting lineup right now, with Rashad Hill on the bench and Christian Darrisaw out there at left tackle, our weakest link is Garrett Bradbury, our center, which is odd to see, because Garrett Bradbury is the highest draft pick out of anybody on our offensive line right now. And so far this season, outside of Rashad Hill, has been the worst player on our offensive line. And you hate to see it, because he's done a great job blocking for Dalvin Cook in the previous seasons. In his 2 last seasons, done a great job being even a lead blocker sometimes for Dalvin Cook because of his speed and also his size. But you take a look at it so far this season, terrible job. He hasn't done anything when it comes to, the Vikings haven't been able to rush up the middle. When you take a look at this entire season, they've been able to rush on the left and right side pretty well, but when it comes to rushing up the middle, have not done a great job. And then take that away, has not done a good job blocking for Kirk Cousins. But you know who we have our big hopes on is Christian Darrisaw. First round draft pick, 23rd overall draft pick. Loved the pick to trade down. Vikings could have took Elijah Vera Tucker at 14, but again, we don't need him, because Christian Darrisaw is a huge upgrade over Rashad Hill, and I would rather take him than Riley Reiff at this point, because Christian Darrisaw is only 23 years old and is the future at left tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. Whoever our quarterback is going to be in the future, they're in good hands. With the offensive line that we have right now, we have, of course, Christian Darrisaw and Riley Reiff at our outside tackles. Offensive tackles who would be doing a good job for whoever is the future quarterback, whether that's Kirk Cousins or someone else in the future. Now, you take a look outside of Christian Darrisaw, there's other players who are stepping in and will be making their debut with the Minnesota Vikings. At number 2, we have Patrick Jones. Patrick Jones is that defensive end who's going to take Stephen Weatherly's role immediately. The reason why the Vikings drafted Patrick Jones, 3rd-round draft pick out of Pitt, is really to be that rotational guy into the lineup when these players sit, or maybe with an injury. Going into the offseason, the Minnesota Vikings focused on defensive end the entire offseason, bringing in Stephen Weatherly, Everson Griffin, Patrick Jones, drafting him in the 3rd round, and Janarius Robinson, drafting him in the 4th round. Now we're going to see Patrick Jones fill that role that the Vikings need, because right now you have Danielle Hunter, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and maybe even top 5 defensive ends in the NFL when you take a look at his season as a whole. And then you have Everson Griffin and DJ Wanham rotating on the right defensive end side. And then you have Patrick Jones, who's really a question mark right now, because we haven't seen much of Patrick Jones so far, but going up against Week 8 against the Dallas Cowboys on primetime, should be making his debut at defensive end. assuming Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter and DJ Wanham don't play all the snaps for the defensive snaps for the Minnesota Vikings, Patrick Jones will get limited play time, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Because anybody from Andre Patterson and the Vikings coaching staff have done a great job on drafting defensive linemen, and taking Patrick Jones in the 3rd round, a lot of people will say is a reach, but I have faith in this Vikings defensive coaching staff to be able to use him as a good, and maybe he can, bold prediction, he might be the starting defensive end for the Vikings in 2022, depending on how he looks the rest of the season, and will be making his debut in purple and gold this Sunday Night Football. Next up, Kene Nwangwu. My favorite draft pick by the Minnesota Vikings out of the 2021 draft pick was drafting Kene Nwangwu in the 4th round out of Iowa State. Getting a running back like this in the 4th round is unheard of. He was a star at Iowa State, and I was surprised that he was still available for the Vikings in the 4th round. Problem is, injuries. Right off of the kickoff for the Minnesota Vikings in preseason, injured right off the bat, and was placed on IR, and is finally making his debut with the Minnesota Vikings after the Vikings have released Ihmir Abdullah this bye week. Minnesota Vikings have Kene Nwangwu filling that running back 3 role for the Vikings. Now you may say it doesn't really matter. We have Dalvin Cook, we have Alexander Mattison. And you're right, Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison make one of the best 1-2 punches in the backfield. Problem is, every year so far they've been in the NFL, they have been injured. Dalvin Cook has missed about half of the games for the Vikings so far this season, and one of them we're counting as a miss because he only played a few snaps in that game, has missed about half of the games for the Minnesota Vikings this season. Alexander Mattison, again, he's injured every year with the Vikings, so that running back 3 role is a huge role to fill for the Vikings, and I'm excited to see what Kene Nwangwu can do with the Minnesota Vikings. Going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, which is a very good run-stopping defense, Kene Nwangwu can be that running back 3 and step in and let these guys rest. And maybe there's some injuries. God forbid. Hopefully there's no injuries. But if we do see an injury with Dalvin Cook again, we should see some Kene Nwangwu action. And maybe A.J. Rose as well, who's on the practice squad, had a great preseason. A.J. Rose might step in as well. A lot of depth at the running back position for the Minnesota Vikings. Last but not least, Ihmir Smith-Marsette. A lot of rookies will be playing up against the Dallas Cowboys this next week. Patrick Jones and Kene Nwangwu, we might not see them. Hopefully we don't, because that would mean our defensive ends are looking good and there are no injuries. But we will see a lot of Christian Darrisaw and a lot of Ihmir Smith-Marsette. Ihmir Smith-Marsette, 2021 5th round draft pick out of Iowa. A lot of Hawkeyes fans swear by this guy. They say he's the best receiver for the Iowa Hawkeyes in the last decade. I mean, a lot of players swear by him as a wide receiver. I don't care how he looks as a wide receiver. I don't care how he looks on offensive snaps. We have one of the best wide receiver trios in the NFL. Outside of that, if we have an injury, we have D.D. Westbrook coming in. I don't care how he looks as a wide receiver. I care how he looks as a special team returner. Because right now, after the Vikings have got rid of Ihmir Abdullah, we have an open spot. Someone needs to be our punt and kick returner, and Ihmir Smith-Marsette is that guy. With his speed and athleticism, can be a great special team returner, yet we haven't seen it yet. That's what I care about, is how he can return punts, how he can return kicks for the Minnesota Vikings. Right now, previously in this season, he was splitting at a kick returner with Ihmir Abdullah. Now Ihmir Abdullah's gone. We have this other Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who's going to be our starting kick returner and playing likely the entire game. We also have KJ Osborne as a kick returner. Don't have him as a kick returner. We saw how that was in the 2020 season, and he was inactive by the end of the season because of his kick returns. I just want to see how Ihmir Abdullah can be as a kick returner, because we haven't had a good special team returner since Cordero Patterson. It's been a long time since I've seen a good special team return game. And I would just like to see Ihmir Smith-Marsette bring that to the Minnesota Vikings, as he will be returning a lot more kicks with the team. On top of that, should be taking the punt return role, as he's right now splitting it with D.D. Westbrook, who I don't really care. I want him to be our punt and kick returner. And D.D. Westbrook can be that rotational guy for the Minnesota Vikings. So those are 4 rookies for the Vikings, because last year we saw a lot from rookies who we really haven't seen a whole lot from yet this season. I mean, Christian Darrisaw has started 1 game in the NFL. Outside of that, Ihmir Smith-Marsette has been rotating with kick and punt return. And we've seen nothing from Kene Nwangwu and Patrick Jones yet this season. Now, going up against the second half, Vikings have a hard slate when you look at the teams that we have to face. Obviously, off of the bye week, Dallas Cowboys. 5-game winning streak, one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. We host on Sunday Night Football, and that will be a big game for the Minnesota Vikings to play. Hopefully we can see a lot better of a match than we've seen previously. I mean, if the Vikings bring the same team they brought against even the Detroit Lions where we won the game, Vikings won't win against the Cowboys. But if these rookies can step up, and I'm looking specifically at Christian Darrisaw and Smith-Marsette here, if these players can step up, Vikings should be able to look a lot better going up against these second half teams that they're going to have to face. But I'm really excited for Kene Nwangwu, and I'm hopeful for this guy. Coming out of Iowa State running back, I'm very hopeful that he's going to look good with the Vikings as a running back 3, and even running back 4 I'm fine with if you have AJ Rose step in as well. So a lot of depth at the running back position for the Vikings. Maybe the only position we have this much depth on the entire roster is the running backs. Thank you.